Hi, I'm Nate from Nerd Conquest Coalition. Behind the camera, as always, is Vern. Say hi, Vern. So, Cricket would also be a good co-host, but I work with what I got. So, I recently played Far Cry Primal, and that is the Far Cry game based off of the prehistoric age, and I want to give you my first impressions on it. This isn't actually a review of it, because, a review implies you've played the entire game, and I haven't. I rented it. Let's just put that out there. I didn't even bother to buy this thing because I didn't think it was going to be worth my time. But I decided it was worth enough of my time to actually give it a go and rent it. So what I'd like to talk about is first is the graphics. The graphics are very good. Everything in there does look gorgeous, and the landscape is full of just greenery and wildlife, and there's winter areas, and the weather system is, for what weather is there, is good. But that's also kind of a problem. All that wildlife and vegetation, you can't see where you're trying to go. If you got a target somewhere in the distance, you're going to have to go into hunter vision in order to be able to see it. So you're going to be in that thing about 90% of the time. It's kind of like the detective mode in the Batman Arkham series, where it's just a kind of a yellow outline with everything else being shadow. So anything that's alive or collectible is yellow. Everything else is going to be shadowy. And that's really the only way you can see what's ahead of you, unless you happen to be on a high peak. And even then, looking down at things, you'll have trees in the way, and the characters just don't pop enough to be able to give you a good view of them. So when you're actually up face to face with something, just really good graphics. But when you're trying to actually hunt something down that's out in the distance, I'm not too fond of it. It's good graphics, but it's messy, if that makes any sense. Meanwhile, the control system. The controls seem a little bit primitive.
Boo.
Don't judge me. So, you have your, standard first-person shooter control setup, except that it's first-person melee. And melee and first-person do not mix. Not yet. I haven't found a good video game that actually pulls that off, in my opinion. You get clubs, bow and arrow, spear, and I guess they're supposed to be some sort of sharp rock that they call shards. This takes the place of throwing daggers, but I mean, I don't know, it just looks like a sharp rock. That one I don't even really use, but anyway, the spear tends to be my favorite because at least that I know where I'm aiming at, because the club just kind of swings every which way, and yeah, it's supposed to hit everything in this general direction on you, except that it doesn't take into account height, and that's really hard to control when you've got some little badger coming at you while caveman's over here. You want to hit them both, swing for the feet, and hope you get the good hit in. But spears, you know where it's going, but you don't know the distance from the camera to where the tip of the spear, because depth perception on that thing's not that good. Also, the jumping system, it's your standard X, but they have so much terrain that you have to climb, or that's a waist height. You really just, you kind of guesswork on a lot of it. It's not a very good platforming system. Now, it's not a terrible platforming system. People have dealt with this same platforming system since Far Cry 3, but I think by this one, I think they should have evolved it slightly. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the story and characters that I've found so far. Pretty decent chunk of the way in, it seems. I found at least most of the specialists that you get to actually teach you things. And each one has their own distinct personality, but the thing is, the entire story and every word said in it is done in a primitive, it's not an actual language, it's a made-up prehistoric language. And everything's subtitles, and I can usually read subtitles and be happy with it, but the performance of the CG characters kind of leaves something to be desired. It doesn't really feel like they're saying what's being shown on the subtitles. It doesn't really mesh together. And I guess that's more because of their prehistoric body language that they're doing. They kind of make them, I don't know how to describe it, it's really just like real simplified body language, like as if body language hasn't evolved, and I guess that makes sense for the story as far as the timeline, but it doesn't engage the player. You don't have any characters in there that are worth really, following or actually trying to see what's going to happen next with them, because you just don't get into it. the overall story of basically you're a caveman who's found his long lost tribe. I don't know what separated them in the first place. They don't really explain that. But he's trying to restore this tribe, and he's got a enemy tribe that he's going against. Pretty standard fare. So there isn't very charismatic characters in this thing. I haven't found one on my side or the villain side that I can really latch on to and focus on. There's just no one catching my interest. In the other games, they had charismatic villains to focus on and also some support characters. And there's always some sort of drug trippiness thing going on, which they did have in this game, but it wasn't nearly as cool as the number 4 or number 3 even. I mean, they just did a better job with the hallucinations as far as everything going on around the world. And this one is more glowy animals and then icemen. At least the 2 that I had. There might be more, but I just don't care to follow up with it. But the story and the characters are usually the most important thing to me in a game. It's the kind of thing that drives me to keep on playing. And, some other people it's the gameplay, and some other people it's the graphics. Everyone has their own, kind of thing that says, I want to keep playing this game. But because this story just did not really do it for me as far as the story and characters go, I'm just not going to continue playing this game. I'm not going to re-rent it or buy it or get any of the DLC, because nothing about it really says, hey, this is a great game. Well, the graphics were great, and the music actually is pretty good. The rest of it just falls short, in my opinion. And yeah, I know this is a first look kind of thing, but first impressions are important. So my view on the game, not really worth getting. Well, I hope that was at least a little bit informative. And for Nerd Conquest Coalition, I'm Nate, and behind the camera as always is Vern. Say bye, Vern.
Hello.
He's trying. Anyway, until next time, be nerd, be proud.